Hello, everyone. Welcome to Practicing Life podcast. I'm Ashley Pitzer, your host, Ascension Coach, and hypnotist. Today, we are talking about 8 ways to overcome perfectionism. Okay, let's just be real here. Perfectionism is a deep rooted issue. It takes a lot of work. So these 8 steps are going to be a beginning point for you. They will definitely help, but this is work. And I know personally because I was there. There are 3 styles of perfectionism, which I'm going to go over. And boy, was I embedded in all of it. So let's begin. I'm going to give you a definition from a psychologist by the name of Hollander from 1965. So perfectionism has become such a big thing now that the definition has changed over the course of time, but I happen to like this one. It is a negative personality trait that manifests itself in an unrealistic requirement for oneself or others to perform well at all times and in all places. All right. So I like this definition. It's a little harsh, but it's the truth. It's the reality of it. But here's what we think of perfectionism. Like perfectionism was something that back in the day when I would go on job interviews and they would be like, "What's your strength and your weakness?" I was like, "Well, my strength and my weakness is both perfectionism." like like that was the answer to everything. And but where I stand today, I see perfectionism as an addictive behavior that is extremely harmful. That's my perception and reality of it. Okay, but this is somebody who has worked for 2 years straight, going to coaching, investing a lot in myself to overcome this kind of behavior and how it was showing up everywhere in my life. Like for me, perfectionism was like if I resembled the Titanic ship. Perfectionism was that iceberg that was taking me down, and it was taking everything that was valuable down with it. Okay, like that's the reality of what it was doing for me in my life, metaphorically. Okay, so what we think of perfectionism as, like why it seems like a strength, it seems so innocent, is because we think of it as striving for excellence. It's just striving for excellence, no big deal. We see it as self-improvement. Like who doesn't want self-improvement? And we just see it as having standards for one's self. But the reality is it is excessive, unrealistic standards centered around self-criticism and self-judgment towards our behaviors and our actions. It is an internal environment where you have thoughts that mistakes are not an option. I've even said this. Like I've said this in the past, like failure is not an option. I know I've told you this like with my I had gotten the idea of becoming a medical coder and I pursued that career and somewhere in the middle of this journey of going to school, I realized this is not what I wanted to do. And it didn't matter because failure wasn't an option. Like these are some of the words that I was saying to myself. So I know this stuff. I know this stuff. I know what it's like. Anyway, it is about your internal environment, your body, your temple, the thoughts that are in there saying that failure isn't an option. Mistakes aren't an option. What would it mean if you made a mistake? What would it mean if you failed? Can you feel the anxiety? Can you feel the self-criticism and the judgment starting to come up already, just me asking you these questions? I mean, this is the effect of perfectionism. There is a tremendous, I can't even stress this enough. There is a tremendous amount of self pressure to be your best at all times. That's one of the reasons why I like this definition from 1965. There are behaviors that you are committed to, actions that you are committed to, where you are constantly proving yourself. You will find that not only are you proving yourself, but you're surrounding yourself with like-minded people that are doing the same thing, and they may be doing it in different ways. Like sometimes when you're having those low moments in your marriage, you're like, why are we together? Like, oh, I get it. We're together because we're validating our stories and our BS. Like, and so, like, me being a perfectionism, I never looked at my husband and thought, oh, he's a perfectionist. But now that I've done so much work, I'm like, oh, he's a different kind of perfectionist. I get it. We were validating our BS stories. Like, we were in this together. We were on the same boat. So, anyway, let's keep going. So you're committed to these behaviors about proving yourself and proving your self-worth. I see this so much when I work with clients, and oh gosh, my heart goes out for you guys. It so goes out for me because I see people striving and their, employers can put any task on them and they'll do it because it's not that they can't say no. It's that they're saying no doesn't give them the opportunity to prove their worth and show that they're good enough. Like, they have to have every opportunity for this because it's always outside of them. It's not internal. Okay? So this is what perfectionism really is. There is this swing. See, like, this is why when I was talking in the very beginning, I said, well, when I interviewed, well, my strength and my weakness is both perfectionism, right? There is this swing, whether you realize it or not. There's this swing. And in one direction, it is high achieving, it is making the impossible possible. And then you swing in the other direction and it's detrimental. Okay. It's awful. So, on one side, when you're swinging in the up motion, like this is some type of bipolar type of behavior that you're committed to. So when you're swinging on the upside, you're putting so much pressure on yourself and there's all this comparison going on and it's pushing you to do more, create more, be more. There's so much stress and that stress is expanding you and it is growing you. One of the things I used to say back when I was an executive was that I liked the stress. I remember telling my husband, like when I was in my workaholic behavior and working like 80 hours a week, and he would be like, do you love me more or do you love work more? Like we had this hard conversation where he was like, I feel like you need to choose because you spend all your time at the office and I spend all my time home alone. And, so I remember having this conversation with him though, when he was approaching me with this, "What do you love more?" conversation. And the whole point was I remember telling him, I love the stress of it. It's almost addictive. This feeling, this urgency to get this all done, and the stress like makes my blood pump and it makes my heart go up. And it seems like a really positive thing, and it can be for a very short period of time, but it is not meant to be sustained indefinitely. So you have this upswing where everything looks like awesome. You're Superman or you're Superwoman. And I know you can relate to this, okay? Everybody loves the days when they are super productive and they knock it out of the park. All right. They love those days and they want those days every day, all the time. So you love this upswing, but then you have the downswing. You have the burnout. You have the health problems. You have anxiety, right? So the down things are that it causes depression, anxiety, it lowers your satisfaction in life. I'm going to keep going with this because you need to fully understand what this is costing you. Perfectionism robs you of joy. I know so many people that can't even celebrate their wins because they're already moving on to the next thing that they're chasing after, proving their worth, proving their value. So there's so much that it robs you of. It robs you of self-acceptance because you're constantly judging yourself and you're criticizing yourself. I use judgment and self-criticism for the longest time as a way of making sure nobody else could do that to me first. So I was the one who was riding my own butt the entire time, putting so much pressure on myself so that I didn't have to receive it externally from other people. Okay. So you rob yourself of self acceptance. You don't even allow yourself to be who you are because you're constantly allowing other people to decide your worth and you're chasing after all of these things. And because you fear making a mistake, it makes it just makes the life so limited. When you're fearing making a mistake, like if you think about like babies when they learn to walk, they're making mistakes all the time. And throughout your childhood, it's nothing but mistakes, and that's part of learning, and it's okay. And creating a safe environment where you're allowed to make mistakes actually helps you to learn more and thrive. But then somewhere along the lines, these perfectionism behaviors start to come in and they supersede this, and then you no longer have a safe environment to make a mistake because it means something devastating. It's a personal attack on your character. It's hurtful when you make the meaning mean that you're worthless. That's hurtful. Those type of thoughts, those type of self-talk, whew, it stings. It creates shame. And shame is something that you just want to hide under a rock and, you know, avoid at all cost. So that's what it creates when you don't allow yourself to make a mistake. It also creates procrastination. If you're wondering why you're procrastinating, you can look and see what am I perfecting and what I'm worried about failing at. It creates indecisiveness, which also is a sign of not being able to trust yourself and your inner knowing. And that increases over time. It doesn't stay at the static level. The more you get into your perfectionism, the more indecisive you get. The more you look to other people to make your decisions, and then you sit there and think, I don't feel right about it, but X, Y, and Z are telling me to do it. So there's all of this self doubt that it creates, lack of self trust that it creates. It also creates helplessness in it. And there's a lot to that because you can't look at other options. It has to be this way. This is the only option. That makes the box really small and tight that you're living in. Whereas when you are able to accept yourself and love yourself and have a safe environment for mistakes, your box that you're living in gets a lot bigger and roomier and comfortable. You may even climb out of your box and go into a bigger box, you know? So, perfectionism has also been associated with eating disorders. Being able to be seen a certain way. I mean, the health industry rides on this with women, defining what beauty looks like, as if there's only one way of looking that is beautiful. And I actually want to do, well, probably an Instagram post on this because this kind of actually bothers me because here's the thing, there's so much judgment around how women wear their hair and you're stealing my culture and, this X, Y, and Z. The reality is, whatever culture you are from, you live in, if you look this way, there's a different level of excellence to look like. And if you're in that level of excellence, then there's something else that comes in and says, no, you have to look this way. So it's always an unreachable standard. Beauty is always defined by the idea that it is unreachable. That's why it's so, like, that's why so many people want to attain it. Like, all right, we're going to move on. All right. So perfectionism, I think it's interesting. It shows up as a way of getting attention and validation. So some people get into perfectionism behavior because it's a way of getting accolades, attaboys, a pat on the back. It's a false illusion that because you're perfect, you might get a promotion. So there's these type of behaviors that you commit to because of the reward you think that you're going to receive. There's also this idea of keeping safe, which I already mentioned myself as an example. So if you are the one who's giving yourself a really hard time, then it's less likely other people are going to give you a hard time because you're going to fix X, Y, and Z so that that's not even an option for anybody to bring up. It's like clients that I've worked with in the past, when they're going into a meeting where maybe their boss has told them that, you're kind of on the hot seat. You need to come in and have this meeting. We're going to address this issue. You could have performed better, and you know this in advance. And then they come to me and they get coached on this. They have already pre-thought like 101 arguments. Their defense is like stacking up, and they haven't even heard what the other person has said. And it doesn't even matter because they're in this unrealistic thing, and they're just ready to protect and defend themselves. And they have all of these ammunitions like ready to fire at this person when they don't even know how it's going to go. And the peace there is gone, because when you're in this perceived threat to your safety and to your character, you're not in the middle of peace. You're in the middle of an internal battle with yourself. So anyway, people will do perfectionism behavior as a way of protecting themselves from being hurt. And it protects them from some perceived fear. They also get into it, of course, I've mentioned this already, for about proving that they're good enough, proving that they're worth. Because they didn't feel it as a child, they're now in this constant, perpetual motion going forward in their life where someone else is always determining their worth instead of just claiming it for themselves. One of the things I really love Brene Brown. I respect her tremendously. I love her work. So I'm just going to rephrase something that she says over perfectionism. And that is that, she wrote in her book that people think perfectionism saves them from being hurt, but it actually saves them from being seen. And I like this because perfectionism in one way is enclosing yourself in a wall where nobody can see you, and you're just in this like doom and this daunting cage that you've created, you've imprisoned yourself into, where you just sit there and judge yourself and criticize yourself and push yourself and work harder and harder and harder, right? And so not only can you not be seen, but you're in this own little prison where you're the master and you're the slave at the same time. And so anyway, I just am creating a different perception for you to help you understand. So there are 3 types of perfectionism. You may see this in yourself and you may see this in others. It's really interesting when you understand this, and you understand because you have this internally, this is what you attract, because like attracts like. So first one is a self-orientated type of perfectionism, a style of perfectionism. I fall into this category. At least I did. But this is where you have high personal, unrealistic standards of oneself. You expect yourself to be perfect. So this kind of matches the overall definition of perfectionism, but it's geared inwardly towards the self. So in this one, you are driven for success and you fear failure. What I find is really interesting is that someone has gone in and done work to associate a type of humor with each of these 3 types of perfectionism. So in this one, you have an affiliate type of humor style, which means that you want everyone to like your jokes. So you're always telling like safe jokes that you think everybody will enjoy, as if there can be no adversity in your life. So the second type is social perfectionism. This is being perfect to somebody else's expectations. This is where you fear disappointing others. And so you're allowing people to mold you all the time because you're living to their expectations and their desires. This is seen a lot in certain cultures, especially for women. And I'm all about making women feel more powerful than maybe they realize that they are. Like, well, I didn't say that right, but they are powerful, but they may not realize how powerful they are. So this is where the humor is very self-deprecating. So their style of humor is about making fun of themselves, as if it lowers or diminishes some of the pressure of their failure to meet somebody's expectations. So they make light of it. The third style is other orientated perfectionism. This is where I I think of this as narcissistic behaviors. This is where you have somebody in your life that expects everybody around them to be perfect, regardless of how they're showing up. But this is where they judge everyone and they view people as incompetent. There's so much criticism towards others, and their humor is very aggressive. So the humor is the type of humor that tears somebody down at their expense. Those are the 3 types of styles. My husband falls into other orientated perfectionism, and I didn't think he was a perfectionist, but now I know so much more about this. So then out of these 3 things, you can show up as overt or covert. So overt is where you are very realistic and order orientated. So you have to be right. You have to be right. Again, kind of along those narcissistic behaviors. You have to be right. And you're very active in expressing your opinions. And, you know, like one of the things I would say about this is because you have to be right, everybody else has to be wrong. So this gets back into more of that third type. This is, associated a lot with this third type of perfectionism, the other orientated perfectionism, like where you're judging other people. So you can technically, just so you know, you can be an overt perfectionism, even in a self-orientated one. So it can appear in all of them. The other type, the covert one, is when you secretly want to succeed, but outwardly you're acting like you don't. So outwardly you're acting like, oh, yeah, don't worry about it. I'm going to miss practice. I got all of these things going on. And then at home, you're spending 4 extra hours practicing. And you're the type of person who is, you're not training with others because you're making sure that you're training to be the best, and you're not letting anybody know your secrets. What's your secret, routines and your secret styles to get to success, right? You're hiding it all. Like, all right. So now you know the 3 styles, the 2 different ways it can show up. And then we're going to talk about how to overcome this. And again, before we even start, I'm going to ask you to think about 3 questions. First of all, what is perfectionism protecting you from? Okay, we kind of talked about this already. Like for me, perfectionism was it was getting me attention and validation. And perfectionism, constantly being critical of myself, was protecting me from other people being critical of me. Like I was already getting everything, all my T's, crossed and all my I's dotted so nobody could criticize me. That was a way of it protecting me. So how is perfectionism protecting you? Then second question, what is perfectionism costing you? It's always costing you something. So you're getting a reward and you're also getting a consequence. There's a cause and effect always. Doesn't matter if you overcome perfectionism, like I am a covered perfectionism, there's still a cost and a reward, even on being on this side of the fence. And that's okay. I'm aligned with that. Right. So, like, for instance, now that I am no longer in my perfectionism, one of the things that it's costing me, right, is like when I do these videos, let's just give an example. You'll hear me breathe. You'll hear me stumble over my words. I do not perfect these videos. I don't spend the time and the energy to do it. I just trust myself to do it and to do it to the best of my capabilities. And I operate from one of the things that my mentor has worked with me on, which is 70% is ideal and successful, whereas 100% is failure, right? So I work now from just doing the best that I can in the time that I have allotted and then letting go of everything else, letting go of the judgment and the comparison and all of that stuff, right? So now I'm on the other side of the fence. So what does it cost me? It costs me the fact that I can visibly see that there are things that I would want to improve on. but I'm okay with that now because the reward is I'm getting it done. I'm getting this out to you. I am serving you. You're still benefiting from this material, even though you can hear me breathe. Okay. You know, so look at your situation. What is perfectionism causing you? What are you giving up because you are obsessively working and you're trying to be everything to everyone and you're focusing on your deficits? Because that's what perfectionism does. You're not just working really hard, you're focusing on what you're not doing right and what you're not creating to your level of standard. So you're constantly in this negative mindset, picking yourself apart. So, what is that costing you? What are you doing about your burnout? Like that's a potential cost of having perfectionism. Is it costing you your health? Okay. Third question. What do you think you experience without perfectionism? What does it look like on the other side of the fence? Is that something you can live with? Is that something you even want? What do you want more? Sometimes you want the accolades and you're willing to pay whatever cost it is. But at a certain point, people get to that burnout stage, their health is gone, their relationships are falling apart. I know because I've been there. The cost becomes where like for me, like I was drowning. I was that Titanic ship going under, and I was taking everything that I valued with me. Things were breaking up for my kids. Things were breaking up in my marriage. Things were breaking up with my friendships. Things were breaking in my health. My body was coming apart, right? I was going down, okay? It was costing me too much, and therefore I was willing to do something about it. That's what human behavior does. Sometimes we're not willing to change until the pain is too painful. This is a different way of putting this is like you'll see this sometimes with people that are in unhealthy relationships and they're not willing to change their circumstance for themselves, but then they see what it's costing their kids and then they become willing to change their circumstance. There's a pain point where you're willing to make the change. So start envisioning what your life would be like without the perfectionism. How much time would you have? How much energy would you have? What would the quality of your relationships be like? Would you be willing to be proud of yourself, even knowing that you have mistakes? Okay, so let's go on to your 8 steps. Let's wrap this baby up. Step 1, awareness. You can't change anything without awareness. So the first thing is becoming aware of how perfectionism is showing up. And for all of you that have been working on this, like I have worked on this, perfectionism still shows up for me. I still have to practice awareness. I still catch myself, maybe staying up late, maybe adding one more client and sacrificing my rest or sacrificing dinner with my family. I still have to practice awareness. That is the way your brain works. You have habits. It is a highway in your brain, a habit in your brain. And if you're not conscious of it, you can slip back into these old behaviors. But the thing about it is, once you create a new highway, a new habit for yourself, it is really easy to turn your car around and go onto the path that works better for you, right? But it still takes awareness and paying attention. Where is this showing up in your life? Like that's the stuff that you're going to look for. All right. Step 2, stopping the self-judgment and criticism and replacing it with self-love and self-acceptance. I love my job as a hypnotist. Half the time what I am dealing with is teaching people to love themselves and to accept themselves, to trust their inner knowing. And I absolutely love it because it is much funner lifestyle. You can have so much more fun in your life when you love yourself and you accept yourself versus somebody who's beating themselves up and berating themselves and judging themselves all the time. Their energy is so low compared to somebody who is loving themselves and accepting themselves. And I really love to see that transition. So that's what I would tell you, step 2. Once you become aware of where this perfectionism is showing up, know that that automatically comes with self-critical thoughts, judgment. Know that it comes with that, and then stop it and find a way of loving yourself. Step 3, practicing failing on something small and insignificant, and just allowing yourself to see it as a learning opportunity. This is where I like to tell my clients, break a personal rule, okay? Whatever that may be. It's just something very small, like something that isn't going to hurt anybody. I never want any harm to come to anyone, okay? So let's make that really clear. So when I say break a rule, I mean something that's like your little whatever that word is, like your, like for instance, you've worked, had a really long day, and maybe you're going to go to bed without brushing your teeth. Like maybe that's a something that you do no matter what, because that's part of your, that social aspect and being perfect, right? So maybe you go to bed without brushing your teeth and you don't judge yourself for it. And you don't beat yourself up for it, but you love yourself in this moment and say one night isn't going to hurt you. You can brush your teeth extra the next day, whatever you have to tell yourself, right? So practice making mistakes and loving yourself through it on something small. So when it happens in real life, on something that has measure to you and importance to you, you have some coping skills for when it happens. And it's major, So when I first put out these podcasts, ooh, did I have some breathing exercises to do with this, because I was like, I mean, I was already judging people that, were my mentors that were putting out material, that you could hear their breathing. You could hear them fumbling over their words. You can hear them forgetting what they're going to say. And I was just judgment, judgment, judgment. Right. And so when I went out and did this and allowed these mistakes to be out there, not only did I have judgments for them, because what you judge other people for, you automatically judge yourself for. It wouldn't exist for you externally if it didn't exist for you internally. So there was a ton of judgment I had for myself, and that judgment did not feel good. And I really had to work through that. So even letting these podcasts go out and having these mistakes, maybe not having, like, I had to get coached, just being real with y'all. I had to get coached on the fact that I had a belief, a perfectionism belief, that anytime you got onto camera, you had to look perfect. Your hair had to be perfect. And I was like, I can't go in there with my crazy wild curl hair going every single way without makeup on, whatever, which I hardly ever wear makeup. So when I say makeup, I mean mascara and lipstick. That's my version of makeup. And I barely do that, okay? But it didn't matter. My perfectionism said that a professional shows up this way, and I wasn't meeting that standard. And I had to be coached through that. So this is what I'm saying about breaking rules. They're not rules of society or laws or anything like that. They're just your own BS beliefs that you have put a prison on yourself on. And allowing yourself to break out of that prison a little bit by challenging them and putting yourself out there in these uncomfortable situations and learning to be comfortable with it and loving yourself through it. Woo! That's something right there. All right, so repeating awareness, step 1, step 2, stop judging yourself and replace with love. Step 3, allowing yourself to fail and be okay with it. Learn your coping skills. Step 4, stop comparison. And I mean, stop comparing yourself even to your past self, because we pretend that it's okay if we're comparing ourselves to our own self. No. Comparison is out the door. You don't need it. Now, can you look at the data and say, okay, something's not working out here. I need to make some changes. Absolutely. Being aware of your stats and altering your course, I'm okay with. Comparison, I'm not. Because what happens when you get into comparison? You go back to that step of criticizing and judging yourself. I could have done better. If I did X, Y, and Z, I might have done better. Okay, that's fine. That can be potentially an observation that you made of yourself, But then I have to ask you as your coach, okay, what are you making that mean? That you didn't do X, Y, and Z before, whatever, and it could have gone better. What are you making that mean? Are you judging yourself? Okay. So this is stop comparing of yourself to your past behavior, to what you had an expectation on for you to create in the present. But this is also comparing yourself to others. I know that we were taught to compare ourselves as a way of motivation in our youth, especially in the US culture. But it's a broken strategy as an adult. Step 5, take it to a higher level. This is one of the things you're always going to hear me say. Take it to a higher level, right? You're in your own lens of reality, your own model of reality, your own box, whatever you want to say. And you can't, like Albert Einstein talks about how you can't solve a problem when you're in that problem. Like you have to take it to a different level. You have to get a different perspective. Albert Einstein understood it's like the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. You have to get a different perspective. You have to look at it from a different angle. You can't keep attacking the problem the same way and expecting it to be different. So when I talk about getting perspective, that a lot of times is like getting distance from it, setting in quiet time, grounding in nature, and letting something go so that you can see something clearly. Okay. One of the things that I would ask you in this particular step 5, take it to a higher level, is does this matter in 5 years from now? Right? Like, this is a very easy way of shifting. What value is this bringing to me? And what does this matter in 5 years on? Right? Like, so getting a different perspective goes back to asking yourself some tough questions. This is why life coaches are freaking awesome, because they ask you those questions. I've given you some pre-questions already, like what is perfectionism costing you? All right, step 6, redefine your goals and your expectations. When all else, you know, a perfectionism by definition has unrealistic expectations. One of the things that I get myself still caught in and I have to work on is I think in one day I can get 4 things done, right? I'm going to do these 4 things today. Let me give you a real life example, right? Today, I'm recording my podcast, I'm editing this chapter in my book, and I'm researching my trademarks. That's just 3 things right there. And I would have more on them. So one of the things that I really like work on now is, okay, my top priority is my commitment to getting this podcast out. The next thing I am working on is editing my book. If that is all I get done today, I've met my expectations, even if I never get to my 3rd and my 4th or my 5th steps. I met my priority. I'm proud of myself. Like, high five. And when you treat yourself that way, it gives you more energy on another day. One of the things, another way that I have to coach myself, right? So there's days when I might be working nights, I might be meeting with clients, and then I start getting into this work mode, and then I'm all of a sudden I'm like, oop, it's my time to go to bed, right? Like, this is my cutoff. I am done working. I'm getting ready for bed. I'm spending time with my family, whatever it may be, right? And so I know at that point, whatever I do, because of that awareness, step 1, because of that awareness, I know at any other point then that I am making a conscious decision on what I want to do and how I'm going to build my recovery in. If I choose that I'm in the flow, because with writing, you're in the flow. And so I understand my rules are no longer stiff. They're no longer, you have to, this is your bedtime, you have to go to bed. This is your internal rule, you can't break. I don't operate from that place anymore. So I know if I'm in flow and this is good for me to write, I will write and I will break my internal rule of, stopping at this point, but I'm also at that point, I'm consciously making a decision of how I am going to honor myself later to make up for this rest. Right? These are the things that you start getting into. So when you redefine your goals and your expectations, you're creating flexibility, you're creating understanding, you're toning it down. And if you create more, aren't you gonna freaking love it? Versus like I had 10 things on my list, I only got to 3, now I have to beat myself up on. Okay, well, I have 2 things I really, really wanna get done, and I got 5 things done. Oh, yeah, baby, now we're talking. So creating these realistic expectations so you can celebrate more often and feel good about it. Step 7, mandatory rest. That means non-negotiable. Burnout is for real. You experience it for a reason. So that means you are going to find time in your schedule for rest. Rest is where your brain does magic. Your subconscious can create and work while you are sleeping. Rest is so important. Rest rejuvenates you. Play rejuvenates you. You can consider rest play. Rest doesn't have to mean sleep. It doesn't have to mean meditation. It can be drawing art. It can be whatever fills your bucket up and rejuvenates you. It can be exercise, whatever it is. You're doing something for you. Fill your tank. Okay? Step 8, last one, acceptance. Okay? Acceptance can be looked at in so many different ways. Let's keep it really simple. Accept that perfection is an illusion. The standard is always moving. You got there, now you have a new level of perfectionism. You have a new level to live up to. Right? Understand that everyone has their opinion, and their opinions are opinions. They're not facts. So for all of you that fall into that other orientated or the self-deprecating one, let me use the correct terminology. Social perfectionism. For those of you that fall into social perfectionism, people's opinions are just that, they're opinions. Accept that you can't make everybody happy. Are you even coming close to making yourself happy? Why don't you count in this picture? Okay, so there's a lot to deal with acceptance. Accepting that you're not responsible for other people's thoughts they're choosing and what they're making something mean. Accepting that perfectionism is failure because of what all it's costing you. Accepting that there are no mistakes, there's just learning opportunities. Accepting that failure, if you want to call it failure, if you want to call it mistakes, whatever you want to label it as, that is part of success. That's just the journey of it. How often do you go out and you get it right the first time every single time? Here's the thing about perfectionism, and I don't know that we went into this at all, but there are people out there that their fear of failure won't even allow them. That's like almost like one of those covert perfectionisms. Their fear of failure won't even allow them to show up in this world and try something because if they don't pre-think that they're going to be good at it, then they're not even going to try. Right? So, understanding that it is better to get 70% towards your goal and consider it done than not even starting. Like this is what acceptance is. It's what you're willing to tolerate. All right. Let's repeat these steps really quickly and we'll sign out for today. Step 1, awareness. Step 2, replacing self-judgment with self-love. Step 3, practicing failing. Break one of your internal rules. Step 4, stop comparing. Stop comparing yourself to others and to yourself and your past performances. Step 5, take it to a higher level, get a different perspective, ask yourself some tough questions. Step 6, redefine your goals and your expectations. And I would also say here, better yet, drop expectations and just work on trust. Trusting that the right amount of work will get done. Trusting that you will do what is needed. Trusting that you have the time to complete things. All right, step 7, mandatory rest, play, whatever it is that fills your bucket. Step 8, acceptance. Accept yourself, baby. Because at the end of the day, you're the one that you're living with, your thoughts, your emotions, what comes up in your body. It's not the body that fails you because your body is just a robot. It has to respond to what your mind says. It doesn't have a choice in the matter. So it's not that your body fails you, it's how you drive your mind. All right. Much love to you. I will see you next week. You matter.